Okay, so let's dive into The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. It's this guide that pretty much flips conventional self-help right on its head. See, it argues that the secret to a good life isn't about chasing positivity all the time. Nope. Instead, it's about getting really, really good at handling life's inevitable problems. Manson kicks things off with this vicious cycle he calls the feedback loop from hell. Just picture this. You get anxious about something, but then instead of just feeling that anxiety, you start getting anxious about the fact that you're anxious. You're just layering negativity on top of more negativity. Yeah, I bet it does. You get angry about being angry. You feel guilty for feeling guilty. It's a total modern epidemic where our brains have this bizarre habit of turning on themselves. We feel bad about feeling bad, and that just makes everything 100 times worse. And this brings us to the first major myth this book just completely blows up: the whole idea that we should be constantly chasing happiness. Manson argues this relentless pursuit of feeling good is exactly what's making us so miserable. I mean, just think about it for a second. Our social media feeds are nothing but a constant highlight reel of everyone's most amazing moments. This cultural obsession with positivity creates this impossible standard. And the paradox is, it makes us feel deeply inadequate for having perfectly normal human negative emotions. You know, the philosopher Alan Watts actually had a name for this. He called it the backwards law. And it's really the core idea of this entire explainer. The more you desperately try to feel good, the more you end up creating a negative experience for yourself. And here's where it really flips everything you thought you knew on its head. Accepting a negative experience, like a tough conversation or a project that fails, is actually a positive experience. Why? Because that's where the real stuff happens. That's where you get genuine growth, trust, and resilience. And it makes perfect sense when you stop and think about it, right? Chasing something just reinforces the fact that you don't have it. You get so focused on what you lack that you can't possibly appreciate what you actually have. So, all of this builds into the next big myth that we need to tackle, this idea that you are uniquely exceptional. Manson tells this great story about a guy he calls Jimmy to show just how poisonous entitlement can be. Jimmy was, all talk, full of this delusional self-confidence, always hyping his next big thing, but he never actually did the work. He felt entitled to success without ever earning it. And this right here is such a brilliant insight. Entitlement isn't just arrogance. It can also disguise itself as victimhood. But both mindsets share the exact same selfish core, this deep-seated belief that you are somehow unique and that the rules of the world just shouldn't apply to you. Our culture just bombards us with the extraordinary, the best of the best, the worst of the worst. This creates what Manson calls the tyranny of exceptionalism. It makes us feel that if we're not amazing, well, then we're basically nothing. And here is the crucial takeaway. Accepting your own averageness isn't failure, it's freedom. It frees you from that crushing pressure to be extraordinary and lets you actually appreciate the simple, ordinary things in life that, let's be honest, truly matter. Okay, so this leads us to the third big myth, the idea that a good life is a life without any pain or problems. See, Manson's point is that problems are just a constant in life. You can't escape them. So the real secret isn't to avoid problems. It's to find better problems you actually enjoy solving. Because at the end of the day, who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for. To make this point crystal clear, Manson tells the story of the guitarist Dave Mustaine. He was unceremoniously kicked out of his band Metallica right as they were about to hit it big. So what does he do? Mustaine goes on to form his own incredibly successful band, Megadeth. But, and this is the key, he chose a terrible metric for his own happiness. He decided he had to be more successful than Metallica. That metric basically guaranteed his misery, because no matter how much he accomplished, he would always just see himself as the guy who got kicked out. Now let's contrast that with the story of Pete Best. He was the original drummer for the Beatles, and he got replaced by Ringo Starr right before they became, the biggest band in history. But unlike Mustaine, Best didn't measure his life against his old band's fame. He chose a completely different set of values, a loving family, a simple life. He chose a different struggle, and by that metric, he found profound happiness, where Mustaine found only pain. So, okay, if the key is choosing better struggles and better values, how in the world do we actually do that? Well, Manson flips a famous quote around to make a really powerful point here. He argues that the first step to solving our problems isn't getting more power, it's accepting responsibility for the power we already have over our own lives and choices. And this distinction is absolutely critical. You might not be at fault for a terrible thing that happened to you, but you are always responsible for how you choose to respond to it. Blaming other people might give you a short-term high, but taking responsibility, that's where the real growth begins. And ultimately, Manson argues that confronting the reality of our own mortality is the only way to cut through all the trivial, everyday nonsense and clarify what's truly important. In the limited time we have, it forces us to ask, what legacy do we really want to leave behind? And that, right there, is the core question this whole explainer leaves us with. When you realize you can only care about a few things, choosing what to care about becomes the most important decision you can make. What problems do you want to solve? What struggles are truly worth your time? Because that, in the end, is what will define your life.